College life can be unpredictable, filled with moments that change everything in ways you'd never expect. That's what happened to me during my sophomore year at Westlake University. I'm Alex, a 20-year-old English literature major who's always been more comfortable with fictional characters than real people. Growing up in a small conservative town didn't exactly prepare me for the diverse social landscape of university life. I've always been the quiet one, the observer, the guy who sits in the back of the lecture hall taking meticulous notes and rarely raising his hand. My roommate often jokes that I'm allergic to social interaction, but that's not entirely true. I just prefer meaningful conversations over small talk, and I'd rather spend Friday nights with a good book than at a crowded party. Then there's Jamie. We met in our contemporary American literature class at the beginning of the semester. Jamie is everything I'm not: outgoing, spontaneous, and effortlessly charming. With warm brown eyes that crinkle at the corners when he laughs and a habit of running his fingers through his dark curly hair when he's thinking, Jamie has this magnetic energy that draws people in. He's the kind of person who knows everyone's name, who professors call on first, and who somehow manages to excel academically while maintaining an active social life. Unlike me, Jamie grew up in a progressive household in a big city, comfortable with himself in ways I've always envied. Before the incident that changed everything, Jamie and I were friendly classmates, nothing more. We'd exchange nods across the lecture hall, occasionally discuss assignments after class, but there was always this invisible barrier between us. I admired him from a distance, convinced that someone like him would never be interested in someone like me. Little did I know that a forgotten pen would be the catalyst for something neither of us saw coming. Our study group formed naturally about a month into the semester when Professor Martinez assigned a group project analyzing the works of Toni Morrison. There were 5 of us, Jamie and me, plus Mia, a sharp-witted journalism major, Derek, a business student taking the class as an elective, and Sophia, a quiet philosophy major who always had the most insightful comments. We'd meet twice a week in the corner of the university library, surrounded by towering bookshelves and the comforting smell of old books. The dynamics of our group were interesting from the start. Mia naturally took on the role of organizer, creating shared documents and keeping us on schedule. Derek brought a practical perspective, always thinking about how to present our ideas effectively. Sophia would listen intently before offering profound observations that often shifted our entire approach. Jamie was our mediator, smoothing over disagreements and keeping the energy positive. And me? I was the researcher, the one who dived deep into texts and historical contexts, providing the foundation for our discussions. The atmosphere during these study sessions was surprisingly comfortable. We'd spread our books and laptops across a large wooden table, sometimes bringing coffee and snacks to fuel our literary debates. There was something intimate about these meetings, the shared purpose, the gradual revealing of our personalities through our interpretations of the texts. I found myself looking forward to these sessions more than any other part of my week, though I tried not to examine why too closely. I've always had a complicated relationship with academics. I love learning, love losing myself in books and ideas, but group work has traditionally been my nightmare. There's something vulnerable about sharing your thoughts with others, opening yourself to judgment or, worse, indifference. But this group felt different. For the first time, I wasn't just tolerating the collaboration, I was enjoying it. And if I found my gaze lingering on Jamie more often than the others, if my heart beat a little faster when he agreed with one of my points or leaned closer to look at something I was showing him, well, I chalked that up to simple admiration for a fellow student. The tension between us built so gradually that I hardly noticed it at first. It was in the small things, how Jamie would choose the seat next to mine, how our hands would occasionally brush when reaching for the same book, how our eyes would meet across the table and hold for just a moment too long. There was an electricity in those moments that I tried to ignore, telling myself it was one-sided, that someone like Jamie couldn't possibly be interested in someone like me. The day that changed everything was unusually warm for October. The campus was alive with activity. Students sprawled on the lawn soaking up what might be the last nice day before winter, frisbees flying between trees whose leaves were just beginning to turn. Our study group had agreed to meet at the library as usual, but when I arrived, I found a note taped to our regular table. Sophia had caught a cold, Derek had an unexpected meeting with his advisor, and Mia had to cover a last-minute story for the school paper. The note suggested rescheduling, but Jamie had added a postscript. I'll be at the East Lawn gazebo if anyone still wants to work today. I stood there for a moment, heart racing at the prospect of a one-on-one study session with Jamie. I could have easily texted an excuse, gone back to my dorm, and avoided the situation entirely. But something pushed me forward, out of the library and across campus to the small white gazebo that overlooked the lake. Jamie was already there, books spread out around him, laptop open. He looked up as I approached, and the smile that spread across his face made my stomach flip. Alex, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up, he said, moving some of his things to make room for me. I thought we could still get some work done, even with the others missing. I settled in across from him, unpacking my own materials. Yeah, no reason to waste the time slot. We've got that analysis due next week anyway. I was proud of how casual my voice sounded, betraying none of the nervousness I felt. For the next hour, we worked surprisingly well together, discussing Morrison's use of symbolism in Beloved and debating different interpretations of key passages. Without the others, our conversation flowed more freely, veering occasionally into personal territory, our backgrounds, our reasons for choosing our majors, our plans after graduation. I found myself opening up more than usual, drawn in by Jamie's genuine interest and easy conversation. Then came the moment. Jamie was making a point about a particular passage, reaching for his notebook to jot down his thoughts, when he patted his pockets and looked around with a groan. I can't believe this. I forgot my pen. I had it this morning in class, but I must have left it there. He rummaged through his backpack, becoming increasingly frustrated. I don't even have a pencil. How did I manage that? I reached into my bag to offer him one of mine, but came up empty. I'd lent my spare to someone in my morning class and forgotten to get it back. Sorry, I don't have an extra. We could see if anyone nearby has one we could borrow. Jamie looked around the empty gazebo and the lawn beyond, where the nearest students were at least 50 yards away. He bit his lip, then his eyes lit up with an idea. I could just use your arm. My what? I blinked, sure I'd misheard him. Your arm, he repeated, grinning now. Just to jot down a few key points so I don't forget them. I'll wash it off before your next class, promise. Before I could process what was happening, Jamie had moved to sit beside me on the bench, our shoulders touching. Is that okay? He asked, suddenly serious. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I should have said no. I should have suggested we just remember the points or use our phones to take notes. Instead, I found myself rolling up the sleeve of my light blue button-down, exposing my forearm. Sure, go ahead, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Jamie took my wrist gently, positioning my arm on the table between us. I'll be gentle, he promised, and then he began to write. The sensation was unlike anything I'd experienced before. The soft stroke of the pen, which turned out to be a fine-tipped marker he'd found in a side pocket of his backpack, against my skin sent shivers up my spine. Jamie held my wrist with just enough pressure to keep my arm steady, his thumb occasionally brushing against my pulse point. I was acutely aware of every point of contact between us. Our shoulders, our thighs now pressed together on the narrow bench, his fingers warm against my skin. Sorry if my handwriting's messy, Jamie murmured, his face close to mine as he concentrated on forming neat letters. I don't usually write on such an unconventional surface. I couldn't look at him, afraid my face would betray the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. Instead, I watched as words appeared on my skin in Jamie's elegant handwriting. Morrison, water symbolism, rebirth/cleansing versus danger/death. Each letter was carefully formed, the pressure of the pen just firm enough to leave clear marks without hurting me. Is this okay? Jamie asked again, pausing to look at me. We were so close I could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the mint of his gum, and something else, something uniquely him. Yeah, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. It's fine. He smiled and returned to his task, adding more notes about our discussion. You have nice skin, he commented casually, as if he wasn't causing my heart to race with every touch. Makes me wish I was better at drawing. You seem to be doing fine, I replied, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. Jamie laughed softly. Just wait until you see my attempt at a concept map. True to his word, he began sketching a small diagram connecting different themes we discussed, his touch becoming even lighter, more deliberate. The marker tip traced delicate lines between words, creating a web of ideas across my inner forearm. Time seemed to slow down in that gazebo. The sounds of campus life faded into the background. All I could hear was our breathing. All I could feel was Jamie's touch on my skin. All I could see was the intense concentration on his face as he worked. It was intimate in a way I'd never experienced. This innocent act transformed into something that felt profoundly significant. When Jamie finally finished and capped his marker, neither of us moved away immediately. He surveyed his work, still holding my wrist, his thumb now absently stroking back and forth. "There," he said softly. "A literary masterpiece on a literary student." I looked down at my arm, now covered in neat writing and small diagrams. It was strangely beautiful, this temporary tattoo of our shared thoughts. "It's going to be hard to explain if anyone sees it before I can wash it off," I said, attempting humor to break the tension. Jamie's eyes met mine, and there was something in them I couldn't quite read. "Tell them you met an artist who couldn't resist such a perfect canvas," he said, his voice lower than before. Then, seeming to catch himself, he released my arm and moved back slightly. "Sorry if that was weird. I got carried away." "No, it's fine," I said quickly, rolling down my sleeve despite the risk of smudging his work. It was resourceful. The moment had passed, but something had fundamentally changed between us. We packed up our things in a silence that was heavy with unspoken thoughts, occasionally catching each other's eyes and quickly looking away. As we walked back across campus together, our conversation was stilted, both of us clearly processing what had happened. "Same time Thursday?" Jamie asked as we reached the point where our paths diverged. "Yeah, sure," I nodded, adjusting my backpack strap nervously. "Hopefully everyone else can make it too." I immediately regretted how that sounded, like I was uncomfortable being alone with him. A flash of something hurt? Disappointment? Crossed Jamie's face before his usual easy smile returned. "Right. Well, see you in class tomorrow." I watched him walk away, my arm tingling beneath my sleeve where his fingers had been. That night, after carefully photographing the notes so I wouldn't lose the content, I stood in the shower and watched as Jamie's words slowly disappeared down the drain. But the memory of his touch remained, impossible to wash away. The next few days were a strange dance of avoidance and hyper-awareness. In class, I could feel Jamie's presence acutely, though we sat on opposite sides of the room. Our eyes would meet occasionally, and he would offer a small smile that made my heart race, but neither of us made an effort to talk about what had happened. I found myself replaying the scene in the gazebo constantly, analyzing every word, every touch, wondering if I had imagined the tension between us. Inside, I was a mess of conflicting emotions. The attraction I felt toward Jamie was undeniable, but it brought with it a host of complications. I'd known I was gay since high school, but coming from a conservative background meant I'd never fully embraced that part of myself. I'd dated exactly one guy, briefly and secretly, during my freshman year, before he transferred to another school. Since then, I'd focused on my studies, telling myself relationships were a distraction I couldn't afford. But Jamie was different. He made me want to be brave, to be honest about who I was and what I wanted. Yet I was terrified of rejection, of judgment, of disrupting the comfortable dynamic of our study group. What if I'd misread the signals? What if Jamie was just naturally tactile with everyone? The thought of making things awkward between us, potentially losing his friendship, was almost worse than the agony of uncertainty. Thursday arrived, and with it, our next scheduled study group meeting. This time, everyone showed up. We sat around our usual table in the library, discussing our project, but there was a new undercurrent of tension that I wondered if the others could feel. Jamie sat across from me rather than beside me, but I repeatedly caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. "Alex, what do you think?" Mia's voice snapped me back to the conversation. They were all looking at me expectantly. "Sorry, what was the question?" I asked, embarrassed to be caught daydreaming. "We were discussing whether to focus our presentation on Morrison's use of supernatural elements or her exploration of trauma and memory." Sophia explained patiently. "You seemed lost in thought." Jamie's eyes met mine across the table. "Alex has some great insights on the symbolism in Morrison's work," he said. "We were discussing it the other day." There was something in the way he said it, a subtle emphasis on the other day, that made my cheeks warm. I cleared my throat and launched into an analysis of water imagery in Beloved, hyper-aware of Jamie watching me intently as I spoke. After the session ended, as we were all packing up our things, Jamie approached me. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked quietly, glancing at the others who were engaged in their own conversation. My heart hammered in my chest. "Sure," I managed, following him to a quiet corner between two tall bookshelves. Jamie ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as a sign of nervousness. "I wanted to apologize if I made you uncomfortable the other day," he said. "With the whole writing on your arm thing. I realize it was kind of weird and invasive, and I've been worried I crossed a line." "You didn't," I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "It was fine. Really." Jamie studied my face, searching for something. "Are you sure? Because things have felt different between us, and I don't want to mess up our friendship or the group dynamic." "I'm sure," I insisted, though my racing pulse betrayed me. "It was just unexpected, that's all." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Unexpected good or unexpected bad? The question hung between us, loaded with implications. I took a deep breath, gathering courage I didn't know I had. "Unexpected good," I admitted softly. The smile that spread across Jamie's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Good," he said simply. "That's really good to know." He hesitated, then added, "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Just the two of us? To talk about literature and stuff." The transparent excuse made me smile. "I'd like that," I said, feeling lighter than I had in days. "Great. How about tomorrow after your last class? The cafe on Elm Street has the best lattes." And just like that, we had a date, or something like it. As we walked back to the others, I felt a new kind of tension between us, an anticipatory electricity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The coffee date turned into dinner when neither of us wanted to end our conversation. We sat in a small Italian restaurant just off campus, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Our families, our childhoods, our dreams for the future. Jamie told me about coming out to his parents at 16, how supportive they'd been, how lucky he felt compared to many of his friends. I shared my more complicated relationship with my family, my fears about being fully myself around them, the distance I felt growing between us as I became more independent. "They love you," Jamie said, reaching across the table to briefly touch my hand. "They might need time to adjust, but if they truly love you, they'll want you to be happy." "I hope so," I said, not entirely convinced but warmed by his optimism. As the weeks passed, our relationship evolved naturally. We still attended study group meetings, maintaining a professional demeanor around the others, but we also began spending time alone together, studying in one of our dorm rooms, taking walks around campus, watching movies huddled together on Jamie's twin bed, careful not to touch too much, though the desire to do so grew stronger each day. There were moments of tension and miscommunication, of course, like when Jamie's ex-boyfriend from high school visited campus and they spent an entire day together, leaving me consumed with jealousy I had no right to feel. Or when my roommate made an offhand homophobic comment, not knowing about my sexuality, and I laughed it off instead of challenging it. Jamie, who was present, didn't speak to me for 2 days afterward. "I'm not asking you to wave a rainbow flag," he said when we finally talked about it. "But I can't be with someone who's ashamed of who they are, who they might be with." "I'm not ashamed," I protested, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I'm just not ready for everyone to know yet." Jamie's expression softened. "I understand that. Coming out is personal, and you should do it on your own timeline. But Alex, at some point, you have to decide if hiding is worth the cost." His words stayed with me, challenging me to examine my fears and the walls I'd built around myself. Jamie never pushed, never demanded, but his quiet confidence in who he was inspired me to work toward the same self-acceptance. The pivotal moment in our relationship came on a cold December evening. Finals were approaching, and we'd been studying in my room for hours. My roommate was away for the weekend, giving us a rare privacy that we both appreciated but didn't acknowledge directly. We were sitting on my bed, textbooks and notes spread around us, when Jamie suddenly closed his book and turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, setting aside my own notes. "What are we doing?" The directness of his question caught me off guard. "Because I like you, Alex. A lot. More than I've liked anyone in a long time. And sometimes I think you feel the same way, but then you pull back, and I don't know if it's because you're not interested or because you're scared." I stared at him, heart pounding. This was the moment of truth, the crossroads I'd been avoiding for weeks. "I'm scared," I admitted finally, my voice barely audible. Terrified, actually. Jamie moved closer, not touching me, but near enough that I could feel the warmth of him. Of what? Of everything. Of feeling this much. Of what people might think. Of messing up and losing you. The words tumbled out, honest in a way I rarely allowed myself to be. "I've never felt like this about anyone before, and it's overwhelming." Jamie's expression softened. "Can I tell you something?" When I nodded, he continued, "That day in the gazebo, when I wrote on your arm, I'd been looking for an excuse to touch you for weeks. I didn't actually forget my pen." I blinked, processing this revelation. "You didn't?" He shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "Nope. It was right there in my backpack the whole time. I just wanted to be close to you, to see how you'd react." Pretty manipulative, huh? A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, releasing some of the tension. "Extremely. I'm shocked and appalled." Jamie's smile widened. "Are you really?" "No," I admitted. "I'm glad you did it. That moment, it changed everything for me." "For me too," Jamie said softly. His hand moved to cover mine where it rested on the bed between us. "Alex, I don't need you to have everything figured out. I don't need you to come out to the world tomorrow. I just need to know if there's a chance for us, for something real between us." I looked at our hands, his tanned fingers intertwined with my paler ones, and felt a certainty I hadn't expected. "There's definitely a chance," I said, meeting his eyes. "More than a chance. I want to try, Jamie. I want to be brave enough to try." The smile that lit up his face was worth every moment of fear and doubt. Slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, Jamie leaned forward. Our first kiss was gentle, questioning, a soft press of lips that asked rather than demanded. When we parted, both slightly breathless, Jamie rested his forehead against mine. "Was that okay?" he whispered. In answer, I kissed him again, with more confidence this time. My hand came up to cup his cheek, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble beneath my palm. Jamie made a soft sound against my mouth, his arms encircling me, pulling me closer. We spent the rest of the evening talking and kissing, learning the contours of this new relationship, setting boundaries, and sharing hopes. It wasn't perfect. We both had insecurities and fears to work through, but it was real and honest and ours. The following weeks brought new challenges and joys as we navigated our relationship. Our study group noticed the change between us, of course. Mia figured it out first, giving me a knowing smile when she caught Jamie and me holding hands under the library table. Derek was surprised but supportive, while Sophia simply said she'd been wondering when we'd finally acknowledge the obvious chemistry between us. Coming out to my family was harder. I did it over winter break, sitting in our living room with shaking hands and a prepared speech that fell apart as soon as I started talking. There were tears and confusion, questions I couldn't always answer, but also, ultimately, love. My mother hugged me tightly before I left to return to school, whispering, "I just want you to be happy." My father needed more time, but he was trying, and that was more than I had dared to hope for. When spring semester began, Jamie and I were officially a couple. We still studied together, still debated literature and philosophy, still challenged each other intellectually. But now there were other dimensions to our relationship. The comfort of holding hands as we walked across campus. The joy of waking up next to each other after falling asleep studying. The deep conversations about our futures and whether those futures might include each other. Looking back at how it all began, with a forgotten pen, or not so forgotten, as it turned out, and soft strokes on my skin, I'm amazed at how something so small could lead to such profound change. Jamie taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than that fear. For me, that something was the chance to love and be loved, honestly and completely. Our journey wasn't always smooth. We had arguments and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and insecurity. But we also had laughter and passion, intellectual connection and emotional support. We had inside jokes about pens and arms and literature, shared memories of that perfect autumn day in the gazebo when everything changed. As for our study group project on Toni Morrison, we got an A, with Professor Martinez specifically commending our analysis of symbolism and memory, the very topics Jamie had written on my arm that day. Sometimes I look at my forearm, now bare of his handwriting, but forever marked by the memory of his touch, and marvel at how the most unexpected moments can become the most significant. Jamie and I don't know what the future holds. We're still young, still figuring out who we are and what we want from life. But whatever comes next, I'll always be grateful for that forgotten pen, for Jamie's courage in creating a moment of connection, and for my own decision to be brave enough to embrace it. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the smallest details: a pen, an arm, a touch that says what words cannot. Total _char_count, 18,672.